I made a video last year about a huge luxury home in Los Angeles called The One. That property was repossessed by the courts and sold to pay the debts incurred by its developers. I speculated about what a more sensible new owner might do with such a large and frankly unlivable private home. I specialize in altering and extending luxury private homes in the UK, and the difference between this market and the US always amazes me. I also occasionally work for property developers, and it seems that no matter how large the budget, the same problem arises when creating a speculative development. Who are we building this for? I recently watched a video on the Architectural Digest YouTube channel about the penthouse apartment at 432 Park Avenue, Manhattan. This is the top floor of a 96-floor super tall skyscraper in New York City. I put a link in the description. Aside from my first job in architecture, when I worked in a skyscraper, I've never actually worked on a skyscraper project during my career. I hated that first job, and I've never really been interested in tall buildings either. While these things are engineering marvels, their interior spatial qualities usually leave me cold. They are often repetitive and bland. But why let a thing like that stop us? After all, this is billed as the pinnacle of luxury private housing in the city. That is something I have experience with. Let's start with the overall building. There has been a lot said about 432 Park Avenue, much of it negative, and I won't go into allegations the development has been used by ultra-wealthy investors to launder dirty money, or the numerous construction defects residents cited in a lawsuit against the builders. I am interested in what life is like in this property. The architect, Raphael Viñoly, has said his original inspiration for the external appearance of 432 Park Avenue was taken from waste paper bins and other receptacles designed by Josef Hoffmann in the early 20th century. I don't know if Viñoly is making this up after the fact, but while 432 is a repetitive grid, you can't accuse the architect of recycling ideas from his other designs. One of his skyscrapers in London is super curvaceous, so much so its glass facade focused the sun's rays and melted cars parked on nearby streets. The site of 432 used to be a hotel, and the plot wasn't very large, so the developer couldn't make a more conventional skyscraper with a wide base. This is the main driver for the super thin design. The building has a slenderness ratio of 1 to 15, which is really pushing structural engineering to the limit. Such a thin structure might sway in the wind, and to prevent this, every 13th and 14th floor is left open so the air can pass through what are called windbreaks. These are illuminated at night, and the windbreaks also provide a visual break from the repetitive square glazing and help give the building some rhythm, but overall, it just looks like blank music notation with the windbreaks resembling the bars. Don't get me wrong, I actually like the ultra-minimal design. I think the geometric proportions look great. The trouble is, residents can seldom perceive this from inside the building. This is where the designers of 432 Park Avenue, for all their resources, ran into the same problem every property developer has everywhere. If you are building speculative homes, you end up designing for Mr. and Mrs. Average. Even if your expected clients are ultra wealthy, you don't actually know who they are and what they might want from a private home. In this case, developers tend to be cautious and they usually design bland spaces. As far as I can tell, every apartment in 432 Avenue is on one level. The only double height spaces in this building are in the public areas such as the pool, conference room and entrance foyer. While there may be some logic and visual clarity to this decision, it's also a lost opportunity to create grander private apartments. After all, these properties sell for tens of millions of dollars each. I doubt that construction cost is the issue here. Just to be clear, in case someone who owns an apartment in 432 is watching, I am not offering advice. I am asking a question. Is there a good reason why the apartments can't have a mezzanine level or a double height space? Maybe New York City's famously strict building codes don't allow it, but let's imagine, just for a minute. Having a taller apartment has several advantages. It adds drama, creating a wow space. And don't tell me the occupants of 432 Park Avenue wouldn't like a wow space. Having a mezzanine or upper floors requires a stair, and that gives opportunities for architectural expression. Imagine the different types of stairs each owner could create for their apartments. Having a mezzanine level also allows an easier view down to the streets below from further back inside the building. To see the street from inside just now, the occupants have to stand right at the window and peer down. The views from this building are worth discussing in greater detail because this seems to be the main selling point. The building is almost a blank canvas internally. Each apartment can be decorated and dressed to suit its occupant's taste, but the bones of the building can't easily be altered. Creating a double height space or mezzanine would require someone to own two adjacent apartments and join them into one. I don't know if this is legally permissible, but if it is, I am pretty sure it will be very expensive. Maybe it's a fact of life that living in a New York skyscraper means the biggest visual interest comes from all the other buildings and not your own. Maybe that's what the developers were banking on, its location being the selling point, not the internal space. 432 Park Avenue broke records, becoming the fastest selling building in New York ever. Maybe the developers were right. Even the penthouse, marketed for $169 million, doesn't have especially impressive internal fittings. The kitchen units are high quality, but not that unusual by the standards of luxury properties in the UK. Here's one I built in 2020. The freestanding bath with a view over New York is cool, but also not exceptional. I built this one in Edinburgh back in 2012. These types of internal fittings and luxury goods are available everywhere. It is the location and the view which generates the value. The building is secondary. That may be a perfectly valid approach. Designing a building whose interior can compete against these views would be a massive challenge, and the design would have to be as complex and varied as the city itself. That would definitely turn off some potential buyers, so the developers went with a bland space and expensive luxury fittings. Speculative development usually leads to uninspiring architecture. The old saying, build it and they will come, applies to 432 Park Avenue only because of its location. The building itself isn't very interesting because the designers chose not to compete against the Manhattan skyline and instead created a bland space filled with expensive amenities for the average multimillionaire. My name is Neil, and I have been a self-employed architect in the UK since 2009. I regularly make videos about the reality of altering and extending private homes. If you want to see more, please subscribe.